This time 2 weeks ago, I was down on a farm in the Mournes where the farmer had 300 or 400 cattle in sheds that he hadn't been able to sell at Christmas time, that had now been overfattened, and that even if he got them sold, he wouldn't get the premium prices that he was looking for. And this time yesterday, I was up in Killeen at a meat processor. One of the last 3 family-owned meat processors in Britain and Northern Ireland. And what those 2 stories tell me is that the balance of power between the farmer and the processors and the retailers has become mangled. And that just as we have to rebalance between out of town to in town, and from the big companies to the small businesses, we have to reconfigure from the big processors and big retailers to the small farmers. And if we don't strategically deal with that, then there won't be small farmers. And that lifeblood of our farming industry, because those farmers who have cattle, the average is only 16 heads, that's all, 16 heads. So we have to just face up to this issue that we have to try to rebalance that relationship and give more authority to the farmers, especially the small farmers, and try one way or the other to take it away from the retailers and the processors. Because the retailers and the processors are never going to give up their 20% margins, never. And they will drive prices in order to have lower prices and keep their margins safe. And that's the strategic issue that we have to deal with, one way or the other, be it through the agri-food strategy, through CAP reform, through political and other intervention. When it comes to the agri-food strategy, let's remember the complementary strategy in the Republic of Ireland, Harvest 2020. 2 years ago, agri-food exports from the Republic of Ireland was €8 billion, with anticipated growth up to the year that ended at the end of last month of 8%, with their growth markets being China, Africa and America. Africa and America being the surprising ones, and America especially on the fish side because of high-value white fish. So our agri-food strategy that we have is a pale imitation of the one that Dublin has, and we need to learn from them. The Irish government has appointed an agricultural attaché at its embassy in Beijing. That's how important they see the Far East and the Chinese market. And yes, I do think that for all the warm words and ambition of our agri-food strategy, a year later it hasn't matured into very much, and that there's a political and farming and fish imperative to do so. Certainly from my point of view, when I was planning minister, I sat down with the agri-food people and worked out how we were going to build 400 chicken houses in order to develop that element of the agri-food strategy. But compared with the ambition of Dublin, it's less. And compared with the reality of what we've done, it is less. 3, what we have to do is just reduce regulation. We hear all the time about reducing bureaucracy and regulation, but what actually gets done about it? When I was DOE Minister, and Mark Hayes-Durkin will bring this legislation into the Assembly in the lifetime of this mandate, we were bringing forward a better regulation bill. And what does better regulation bill do? It has light regulation for the compliant farmer or processor, and harsh regulation for those that offend against best practice, and that the regulator should be a one-stop shop, so that rather than farmers or processors and other people being visited by a whole lot of inspectors, you have an inspectorate with inspectors that can do it all. Real-time, effective change in terms of better regulation. And finally, CAP reform. I heard Jim Nicholson acknowledge what he was doing yesterday on the radio, where the Agriculture Committee of the European Parliament had interrogated the Agriculture Commissioner in an effort to try to ensure that the outworking of CAP reform was better. And what did that prove? It began to prove the greater power of the European Parliament when it comes to the Commission. That's all post-Lisbon consequences, and it's welcome. because rebalancing the power between the Council of Ministers that represents the interests of governments and the Parliament that represents the interests of citizens is very important. And being in the Parliament and being in the Parliament in the biggest group in the European Parliament after the May elections is going to be very important. And we do need to work out what's going to happen in respect of the two regions. Because if we don't, this is the last point, if we don't, a default position will arise in August, and the default position will be one zone. It's better that the executive have a mature and proper conversation around it, rather than what happened in December, where people acted unilaterally, in my view, to the disadvantage of the farming industry.
I'd like now to move on.